with us. And he is up first. Patrick is with the Mojave Desert Land Trust. And he'll be speaking about the Mojave Desert Seed Bank today. So let's take it away, Patrick. Share your screen and I'll let you go.
Great. Thanks, Alexis. This looks good. You can see my presentation in presentation mode, right?
Yes, looks
Great.
great.
All right. Uh, Hi, everybody. I'm Patrick. I am the Associate Director of Plant Conservation Programs at the Mojave Desert Land Trust, where I lead our native plant nursery, our Joshua Tree conservation efforts, and the Mojave Desert Seed Bank. So today, I'd like to introduce you to the work we do at MDLT with the hope that something we do might inspire some aspect of your work, and to encourage all of us to continue supporting each other as we build partnerships, break down silos and barriers, and work together to advance plant materials availability where we work. So through my work at the Mojave Desert Land Trust, I strive for a future with persistent ecological integrity, where interconnected landscapes continue to provide aesthetic, cultural, and spiritual values, along with the ecosystem services that we all depend on for our well-being, and the well-being of our habitat. Um, to realize this future, we really need to take a two-prong approach where we conserve and protect existing plant communities and landscapes while also restoring damaged and degraded ecosystems. As most of us know, the amount of degraded and damaged lands in need of restoration is vast, and the need for seeds and plants to restore these lands is immense. And so this restoration work not only requires a huge quantity of seed, but also benefits from the inclusion of diverse taxa and ecologically appropriate seed from ecotypes adapted to local climatic conditions of each individual restoration project. And so meeting this need is really going to require large and small producers working collaboratively with land managers, practitioners, and community partners. And so small producers are integral to providing the ecologically appropriate seed that's needed for restoration in the regions where they operate. Small producers tend to have expertise with the local flora and ecosystems in the regions they operate. They're able to provide amplification services within similar environmental conditions to recipient sites, and the diverse perspectives encompassed by a large number of small producers are really vital for developing the unique approaches that are going to be required to meeting this growing seed need. And despite the value that small producers provide to conservation and the national seed supply, they often struggle to get established and to persist among high capital and expertise barriers to this work. Native plant materials are really expensive to produce, and although funding opportunities do exist, they are limited, and with so many small producers, there's high competition for those resources. And small producers are also limited by scale constraints, and struggle to compete with lower prices that larger, more efficient operations are able to offer. And so what I'd like to do is introduce the Mojave Desert Land Trust as a case study of a small organization facing many of these challenges I just mentioned, along with additional challenges caused by the arid environment in which we work. We're learning to improve efficiency while leveraging grant funding and cooperative partnerships to provide plant materials for restoration in the desert region. As a land trust, we have extensive property holdings, and we're able to make valuable strides towards ecological integrity within our region. But in isolation, our impact is really quite small. And to truly envision this future with ecological integrity, In our deserts, we need to develop networks of additive partnerships and systems of collaboration and support with organizations within and outside of our service area. So first, I'll talk a little bit about our plant conservation work at MDLT, and then discuss some of our partnerships and efforts to build the movement for native plants. MDLT is now in our 20th year of conserving lands within the deserts of Southern California, and so that includes portions of the Mojave and Colorado or Sonoran deserts in Southern California. And since our founding, we've protected over 130,000 acres of this landscape. As a land trust, we've always focused first on conserving intact ecosystems through our acquisitions, stewardship, and monitoring work. This work frequently requires cleaning up trash dumps, obscuring and decompacting unauthorized vehicle routes, and preventing future disturbance by installing fencing and signage. As our land holdings and organization have grown, we've shifted to also addressing the restoration needs in our region by adding native plant materials to our repertoire of land management tools. And so what began 10 years ago as small native plant sales to the community from locally collected seeds has grown into a program where we are aiming to conserve the flora of California's warm deserts through long-term conservation seed collections and to providing ecologically appropriate seed for plants for restoration. By starting our plant conservation efforts as a small component of MDLT's land stewardship work, we're able to reduce the capital and technical expertise demands and slowly gain experience, momentum, and support to the point where we're currently supported by generous state funding and hold over 800 active collections of over 300 unique taxa in the Mojave Desert Seed Bank. The accessions in our seed bank are a combination of long-term conservation collections and larger restoration collections that are a proactive resource that enables a timely response to disturbance by having seed immediately available for amplification work. The ex situ collections in the seed bank are a component of our larger conservation strategy, and they're intended to support the natural plant life cycle on the land, not to replace it. All of our collections come from the land, and they're intended to return to the land after a period of time under our care. And so I'm sure many of you are familiar with components of seed banking work, but I wanted to quickly discuss some of the techniques and considerations that we employ when doing this work. So scouting for collectible populations and tracking phenology of those populations is a time-intensive year-round process. And in this work, we prioritize targeting new taxa and collections of restoration species across multiple provisional seed transfer zones. Once a target taxa is at its naturally dispersing state, we collect seed by hand, aiming to collect no more than 10% of the available seed and not recollecting from a population from a period of 5 to 10 years so that we leave sufficient seed for the next generation of that species, as well as the wildlife that relies on it. While collecting, we record detailed metadata about the population and the location, as well as any specific considerations about how to collect the species. Collections are then brought back into the lab, where they're dried under ambient conditions for a period of at least a couple of weeks, and cleaned through a variety of manual and mechanized techniques. Seeds are then placed in sealed containers in cool storage, where we conduct regular germination tests to assess longevity and develop propagation protocols. Seeds are tested prior to storage, after 1 and 5 years in storage, and at 5-year intervals thereafter. Seeds are retained in storage until they're needed for reintroduction, research, or restoration, or until their viability drops by more than 20%, at which point we find a way to distribute those seeds back on the land, either through seeds or plants for restoration, or doing a amplification grow out where we'll maintain the collected seed for the next generation. And the seeds in our care are living organisms, and so they only have ecological value if they're on the land. And so we do everything we can to get them back on the land while they're still viable. An important component of our seed banking work is our herbarium, where we catalog and store voucher specimens associated with each seed collection we make. These vouchers are valuable documentation of species occurrence and a potential future resource for ID confirmation and other research. Uh, but plants aren't often at their prime for pressing when seed collections are made. So we collect vouchers earlier in the season when a species makes its way onto our target species list, or the following season when there's fresh material available. In addition to grow-outs, when seeds start to lose their viability, we also do pilot seed increase trials to amplify some of our smaller collections, and also develop protocols that can be used to lower barriers for commercial growers who are attempting to transition to native seed production. Another component of our plant conservation work is our native plant nursery, where we provide plants to our local community and restoration practitioners. We grow about 4,500 plants from 100 different species for our one-day public sale every year, which is a huge draw to our facilities, and we have people lining up before sunrise to get their hands on those special rare plants that they can't get anywhere else. Our nursery also grows plants for restoration projects across our region on a contract basis. And we've begun pasteurizing our growing media and implementing phytosanitary protocols as we near certification under the Accreditation in Restoration program through UC Davis. The most public-facing component of our plant conservation work is our Desert Discovery Garden. It's located on a former parking lot at our headquarters facility, and provides an opportunity for the public to see native plants in a landscaped setting, where they can also learn about plants and the desert ecosystem from our many educational panels. As folks learn to incorporate native plants into their home landscapes, our community builds ecological integrity and reduces our draw from our limited water supply. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the ways we're building partnerships and supporting collaboration to meet the need for native plant materials in our region. Historically, we focused mostly on collecting seeds from MDLT parcels, and although we own and manage tens of thousands of acres, there's many parts of our service area where we don't have lands, making it very difficult to collect many species, especially the rarer and more patchily distributed species. So we've begun working with other land trusts, local governments, and other NGOs to expand our reach for seed collection. And we currently have memoranda of understanding with 4 other organizations, allowing us to collect seeds on lands they own or manage. These agreements provide cross-training opportunities between the staff of the 2 organizations, and we usually provide 10% of the seeds we collected back to the landowner manager organization for their own needs. As you can see from this heat map of our current seed collection locations, we have a patchy distribution across our region where MDLT has land holdings. But adding these seed partnerships that are outlined in blue, we've nearly doubled our land base for collections. In addition to these MOUs, we're also working with federal agencies through cooperative agreements for plant production and seed increase protocol development. And we're also beginning to offer our seed collection, processing, and storage services for vetted restoration projects. And in addition to directly providing material for restoration, we're also working with professional organizations to develop strategies for conservation of the California flora through California Plant Rescue and the Joshua Tree Conservation Coalition, and for improving seed science and seed supply chains through the Mojave Desert Native Plant Program. Another important way to improve the native seed supply is to help build folks up by sharing knowledge and techniques. So I'm very thankful for all the folks who have presented at this conference, freely sharing what you've developed in your own work so that others, the rest of us, can build off of it. In addition to gatherings like this, we also share and learn from others through tours and workshops. We engage with regional tribes to discuss our protocols and how we can do our work in a more culturally sensitive way, and by providing data and protocols to others. One exciting way that we've worked with our indigenous neighbors was on the signage for our demonstration garden. We worked with the Uhaviatum of San Manuel Nation to revise and approve all of the cultural content in our panels, and also to include the Serrano language names for many of the plant placards that we have in our garden. And so I'd like to close by sharing a DIY tool that we recently developed for seed extraction. We're calling it the Seed Squeegee, and a design and build document will be coming out in the next couple months. We're going to share this under a Creative Commons license, which allows folks to use and alter the design as they see fit. But the only restriction is that you can't profit from that design. So let's continue sharing creative solutions and working together to reduce barriers and bring more folks into the native seed movement.
Thanks.
I need to thank the Wildlife Conservation Board, the California Wildlife Conservation Board, which is a major supporter of our work, as well as our amazing team at MDLT Plant Conservation Department, as well as our donors, supporters, volunteers, and partners. Thank all of you for attending, and please reach out if you'd like to discuss anything I presented on here, or if you're working in our region, we'd love to connect and expand our networks. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. That was really great. We have a couple questions, and I think we've got time for them. The first one is, can you say more about how you created your partnerships with neighboring landowners and or organizations?
Um, just reached out to most of them. We've had partnerships with many other of the trusts and the NGOs through just the conservation work that our organization has done, and others we've just cold called, offer to share what we do, how we might be able to work together, but focus on those ones that do have larger land holdings. Some of them are much easier than others. We've had to present at local government meetings, and others have just been a really quick signing of the MOU.
Great. Yeah, that outreach can definitely be uh, take time. Um, see, we've got a couple questions about the seed squeegee, but let's ask Elon's first. What percent of your plant production goes to plant sales versus your own restoration?
I think it's about 20% is our retail sale during our 1 day public sale. And then the remaining 80 is generally for uh, restoration contract grows. We currently haven't done a ton of active restoration on our lands, but we're partnering with other land trusts, federal agencies, consultants who are doing restoration work for others, to provide that material to them.
Great. Um, okay. I guess both questions I'm going to combine these about the seed squeegee. Does it work like a DIY brush machine?
Exactly.
And okay, and then is there a place where we can get information, plans, specs about it?
Yeah, so that was inspired by we visited the Benseed Extractory, and they have a machine that the Forest Service tech folks developed in the 70s, and the Westrip brush machine. And those are just so expensive to buy and really hard to produce if you want to build your own. So was the inspiration of this. Um, we're we're gonna put together a spec sheet and a build kind of video series that'll go up on the MDLT site, hopefully by the summer.
Great. Um,
But if anybody wants to talk about it, reach out individually.
okay. Sounds great. Thank you so much, Patrick. We're going to move into our next speaker. Um, Next we have Danielle Carlock Cowan from the Maricopa Native Seed Library, here to talk about seed libraries, which I'm very curious to hear more. So welcome, Danielle. Please share your screen and take it away.
Okay, I'm just having a moment here with screen sharing. Let's see. I don't think it, there we go. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, but it's a Zoom page. Okay, yeah, there's your
Okay, I think I needed that step.
presentation. Yeah,
How
cool.
does that look?
That looks great. We can hear
Okay,
you
great.
just fine.
All right, I'm gonna just, shall I go ahead and get started?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Carlock, and I'm a librarian or library faculty at South Mountain Community College in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm going to be talking to you about maybe an alternative pathway or system for increasing native plant availability, specifically related to urban environments, and specifically about how civic institutions, namely libraries, can play a big role. Um, so that's sort of my question is to ask you how civic organizations may get involved. And so I've been working for about 5 years on a community scale seed distribution through a native seed library as a complementary way for ecological restoration, but really about urban restoration to have impacts in urban and suburban landscapes. So first, just kind of what is a seed library? Because sometimes there's some confusion about the difference between a seed library and a seed bank. And a seed library is typically associated with a traditional library, a brick and mortar library, public library, academic library, and it's giving seed away to the community freely, whereas seed banks typically store seed for longer term use for conservation. So most seed libraries, and you may be familiar with them at your local public library, are focused on food seeds. So giving away, let's say, crops such as tomato, lettuce, broccoli for focusing on food security. And those are the most common types of seed libraries. But a native seed library has a different emphasis. Some of those foods, excuse me, those seeds may be edible plants, but it's really focusing on urban restoration, or sometimes called naturescaping or wildscaping, or contributing to habitat at home movements. Sort of the idea of getting people to bring nature back into the places where they live, into their yards, into their patios, their balconies, and bring wildlife in and support wildlife. And so if you're engaging in a native seed library, there's really a different type of seed procurement than you would be with a seed library that's a food seed library. With a food seed library, those libraries typically buy seed directly from producers for their lettuce seed or their broccoli seed, whereas there is an approach that's more like organizations that are involved in ecological restoration, procurement through permitting in wildlands and such, which I'll be talking about next. So that's a piece of a seed library that's native, that's a little different. And because of the procurement mainly, but other reasons as well, these type of seed libraries do require plant expertise that's beyond most librarian skill sets. So for me personally, I am a librarian, but I'm also a native plant enthusiast. So I was able to marry those two things in the position. But there may be a barrier or bar for seed lib or for libraries to enter the world of native seed libraries because of that expertise, which we'll talk about how other organizations can partner with them. So a little bit more about urban restoration. The Maricopa Native Seed Library that I founded was really about trying to get the community to engage in urban restoration because there's more and more recognition that our wildlands are under so many pressures that we also need to be thinking about how do we support wildlife and conserve native plants in those places that we live in our home landscapes. And so these are just some pictures of different people who have engaged in urban restoration and had their habitats certified through the Maricopa Pollinator Pathway, a habitat certification program I started. And really to think about this as complementary to ecological restoration, we have sort of these two complementary pathways that together create an amazing synergy. So, just a little background on the types of plants that are included in the Maricopa Native Seed Library. We have over 50 species that are offered, everything from native trees and shrubs, wildflowers, vines, cacti, and succulents. And when I started developing my target list, I was looking at kind of four main criteria. I wanted the plants that I included to be have high wildlife value, typically pollinator plants, nectar or pollen plants, or larval host plants, plants that were more on the xeric end as opposed to ones that might be from more riparian microclimates or things that wouldn't do well in the urban, heat island landscapes. Um, a really important component to me was to get plants available to the public that had never been available commercially at all, not only from seed, but also just as plants you could buy at the nursery, and also generally plants that were easier to germinate. So not all the seed library plants have all four of those criteria, but those were the four criteria I was really looking to when I bring plants into the seed library. And of course, all the plants are locally Maricopa native plants, or in some cases, a few bioregionally native plants, very selectively. So now I want to talk about kind of the components of the seed library and then take that out to a kind of a scale that out to like what a system what might look like. So one of the things about Maricopa County, if you've ever been here, is it's humongous. It's 60 to 70 miles wide. And so there's a big population center. So I wanted to reach as many people as possible. So the idea would be that it would be kind of a distributed model. The base is at my library, the South Mountain Community Library, but to also distribute seeds through other venues, which we'll talk about in a moment. For seed procurement, I went two kind of arms with this. I wanted to make sure there was some genetic diversity in the seed library. So I was able to obtain permits from the Tonto National Forest, City of Tempe Parks, and South Mountain Park, and ethically collect seeds under the BLM protocol. So there's seed being collected from those locations. Then we also have established some campus gardens that we can kind of amplify seed, and we do take some modest verified donations. So this is the part that I think is a harder barrier for many libraries to reach if they want to start a native seed library because of the procurement piece. Now, distribution for us happens through several of the community college libraries. I'm at the Maricopa Community Colleges. We have 10 campuses, and several of the campuses host kind of permanent seed library branches, if you will. There's a nature center, the Center for Native and Urban Wildlife at Scottsdale Community College hosts a location. And we have pop-ups, so places where I reach out and say, hey, would you like to be a pop-up for the seed library? You get seed, you get a whole sort of kit to set up a pop-up for a few weeks, and it's marketed and promoted. People come, get seed, and then that location finishes. It's just kind of a temporary location. And we do a lot of tabling at events. So besides all of the actual seed piece, to me, the education and outreach was almost just as important as, providing seed to people, because the public doesn't have a very good understanding about native plants, native plant gardening, any of these sort of things that have to do with supporting wildlife. There's not a lot of that, especially in Phoenix, where we see a lot of non-native plants or kind of what I call ecologically dead home landscapes. So I do a lot of workshops and talks. Some of them are on YouTube, a lot of them are in person. Anywhere and anywhere I can get myself doing talks, I do those talks. I've produced native plant profiles on all the plants. Each plant gets, a lot of information associated with that goes out on the packets for people as well as on the website. We have demonstration gardens for people to see the plants. Because I'm at a college, I do co-curricular activities like seed collecting trips. Students are invited, nature walks and bio blitz on campus, and as well as uh, involving them in seed packing and things like that. And then we also do germination trials, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And I've also partnered with the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community and Tonatera Community Development and Indigenous Rights Organization in Phoenix, where we have worked on a project to start sharing the plant names in Otham and Peepash, which are now featured on the plant information sheets, and we have more projects planned. So this is just another way of looking at the components of a seed library. I've already talked about most of this. I'll just highlight the assessment piece. I think, is it working, is something that's really important. And I have an ongoing seed survey that people can reply back and let me know, what happened with their seeds when they took them home. And that's been very informative for me as well. Um, there's definitely an unmet need that we uncovered. I didn't expect that. I thought it'd be very niche, but there's been a lot of interest not only in people taking the seeds, but a lot of media attention and recognition. Now, this slide here shows you how a community scale native seed system may work. And so you can kind of see the flow through, and I'm just going to start. So on the left-hand side with the wildlands, so we have collecting by permit on wildlands, which I mentioned before, specifically mostly Tonto National Forest. And those seeds then partly go into germination trials done by the Center for Native and Urban Wildlife, and partly go into seed distribution through the seed libraries. Then we have the germination trials. They inform our education efforts, but they also provide additional plants to go into the gardens, which then become seed sources into the seed libraries. And then the seed libraries and the branches are not only distributing seeds to the community, which then allows the community to engage in urban restoration, but we're also providing that education that also informs the community. And that education is informed by indigenous knowledge and expertise. And so that's sort of the example of a native seed system. And I just want to highlight how libraries, so as a native seed library, I'm a part of a larger, traditional library. Libraries can really serve as ecological infrastructure and conservation multipliers because we have a lot of the things already built in that will really help with conservation efforts. We're trusted institutions. We've been there a long time. We have logistics and access infrastructure. We get a lot of foot traffic. We get a lot of visibility. A lot of non-traditional audiences for conservation can be reached through us. We already have missions related to education. Our professional associations are in alignment with sustainability. The UN development goals are something that many libraries have built into their own um, long-term plans, and we're everywhere, right? Libraries are throughout all different types of communities. So it's an ideal place that if you want to collaborate, um, different groups and organizations can come together and the library can function as a hub for distribution of seeds. And so this slide just kind of shows that there's lots of different skills needed for native seed library, but no one person or organization needs to have those skills. So if you're a library, you can, serve as that hub. You can partner with other organizations and be a hub for distribution and a hub for education. Whereas agencies such as tribal or local or state or federal agencies can have the ability to grant permits. They can lend their expertise. Nurseries or growers can amplify seed sources. Community gardens can be seed sources. And other nonprofits like a Native Plant Society can lend expertise through volunteers. So, really what I'm trying to say here is that, a native seed system that with a library as a focal point can involve all these organizations and work toward urban restoration goals, each with providing their own expertise or their own capacity. So this is kind of what the Maricopa Native Seed Library has been doing and building towards. And I just wanted to get people thinking about that, as far as how libraries can really be involved in these efforts. So if you manage land, maybe there's seed access you can unlock that would help a native seed library get founded in your area. If you work with native plants, maybe there's a way your expertise could scale through a seed library. And for librarians to assure librarians that they don't have to be botanists, they have to find their partners. So if there's any interest in these sort of models, please reach out. I'm happy to try to connect groups or be a sounding board as this is something we're continuing to evolve where I am. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Danielle. We have a few questions for you and plenty of time to answer them.
Yeah.
Um, Let's see. Hi, Danielle. I'm a librarian interested in starting a similar program. How did you obtain support and funding to run it? How do you keep people from putting their own donations of seed that aren't native from ending up in the libraries?
Yes. So there really wasn't any funding per se because I just did it as part of my position. And so, I mean, there was small supplies that I had to get, and some of that was self-funded, and some of that was funded through some district grants that we had for sustainability. So the funding, it's really about the time, finding the time and finding the volunteers. Volunteers have really helped me a lot with seed collecting and with processing and packaging. So that's a big piece. And as far as the donations, I only take verified donations from people I know, and I can see a picture of the plant it came from, and I can see the seed and recognize that. So, and it's very limited. I don't take a lot of donations at all. I mean, probably it's maybe if it's 10% of what we have in the seed library, that's probably a lot. It's mostly people from the Native Plant Society and others like that that I've known and worked with for quite a while.
Great. Um, let's see. Next, we have how do you attempt to verify the source of donated seeds from your library?
Right. So people reach out to me directly and say, "Hey, I have X or Y," and then I go through that process I was just discussing. People just don't come and drop seed off at the seed library. It's really a personal interaction back and forth. And I think I maybe have had maybe a dozen people be donors, and they have some specific plants I'm really looking for, and I know them, and they regularly donate. So it's kind of like that. It's not a wide open thing. I haven't promoted people bringing back seed more widely because we really haven't had to do that. So,
Great. Could you talk a little more about the process of obtaining permits for collection?
so when I started out, I found the right person on the Tonto National Forest, one of the botanists, and I explained to him what I was doing and that I'd be following the protocols. And I had done some volunteer work with seed collecting at different local organizations and had learned some of those processes. And I explained to him that the seed was going to be given out for free, so it wasn't a commercial permit. And so they trusted me enough to issue the permit, and now I've had one for 5 years ongoing. And it was really cool that one time I actually got called on it. We were out collecting, and we ran into a ranger, and he said, "Whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing?" Because he saw us collecting seed, and I whipped that permit out, and it was really great. He said, "Oh, that's amazing," and he didn't know, and it was really great to actually, finally have someone be checking on us, so to speak. But yeah, I found that, and then also the one from South Mountain Park came about through a relationship where the rangers there reached out to say, "Hey, we want to learn how to seed collect. Can you teach us?" And then I went out with them, and then that led to them giving permission for us to collect. And now they're not only a seed source, but they're also a seed distributor. They have a location at their visitor center. And they're also packing seeds with their volunteers. So they've become like kind of a full on board partner, which has been amazing. So the partnerships just kind of keep snowballing, and that's an amazing part of it.
Yeah, that is really amazing. Yeah, it's great when they're kind of passively developed in a way, like you've got putting in a lot of work as well, but people are interested in this, so that's great. Um, let's see, we have a request to share your contact info. Um, and then one more question. As someone who works for a state nursery, how could I get an initiative like this going with our local libraries?
So I would reach out to the library to see if you probably would start with the head of the library and see if you can set up a meeting to talk about it. And really, I think libraries will be receptive because seed libraries have become mainstream, at least food seed libraries, and they may even have one or be thinking about one. And native seeds can be added into that existing seed library or a new one if the expertise is there from the people that are the plant people, because the librarians, what they can do is they know how to distribute, they know how to market, they know how to inventory, they know how to get that access out. That's the part they can steward. And then they can host workshops that people can come that are experts and talk. It's a great hub for that piece. It really takes advantage of what their expertise along with yours. Mhm.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Danielle. Yeah, people are really interested in seed libraries. I don't know if we have one in the towns I live in or work in here in the Willamette Valley. So we'll have to look into that. Except maybe a food library in Corvallis, but yeah, well, great. Thank you so much. We will move next to Karina Mudd. Karina is with Valley Eco, and she'll be talking about seed supply coordination and capacity building for Western Monarch Conservation Collaborative. So welcome, Karina.
Thanks, Alexis. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yes.
All right. I will go ahead and share my screen. All right. Are you all seeing that all right?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, it's great to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. Like Alexa said, I'm Karina Mudd, Director of Planning and Partnerships for Valley Eco. We do a lot of restoration work in the Central Valley of California, specifically the San Joaquin Valley. And today I'm going to be talking about the San Joaquin Valley Western Monarch Collaborative as an example of seed supply coordination and capacity building. This presentation is sort of on behalf of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who really launched this initiative, and then they brought my team at Valley Eco in to help facilitate. So it's definitely a great example of a lot of collaborative work that I'm excited to share with you. So I'll just give a quick kind of overview. I'm going to talk about the project itself and the collaborators involved, sort of how we formed this initiative. There's a strategic plan as kind of the backbone to the project, and that which does align with the California Native Seed Strategy. And then I'm going to highlight some of the elements of the collaborative through these kind of sub-teams or action teams that we built. And I will just flag the photos throughout this presentation are of some plantings that we've done all in the San Joaquin Valley, mostly integrating milkweed onto existing sites or existing restoration projects. Hopefully the captions kind of tell a bit of a story about those photos as I go. So to start, there's really two components of this initiative that kind of came together at the same time. So the first component is monarch conservation. And as many folks may know, the Western monarch was proposed to be listed as a threatened species, which will, of course, have pretty big ramifications across the states, but especially in the West. And so 2025 was the monarch population's third lowest year ever. It's a really critical time for focused conservation efforts. And largely what that will mean is this need to create more habitat, enhancing existing habitat, adding more habitat, milkweed and nectarine species in particular. And this is a somewhat underdeveloped area in certain parts of California more than others, but there's a huge need everywhere. The second component of this initiative is the regional focus. So the San Joaquin Valley, I'll show you in a map just in a minute, but as part of the Central Valley of California, it's a very important region for monarchs. Based on their breeding, for monarch breeding and nectaring habitat during migration. And there, at the same time, there is pretty substantial landscape change slated to happen and already happening in the San Joaquin Valley. So the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was passed in 2014. It's a legislative mandate that sets goals for the reduction of groundwater use in areas that are critically overdrafted, which is most of the San Joaquin Valley. And so what's happening is you have a lot of agriculture in this region, and many farms are having to figure out ways to reduce their groundwater use. And what that's looking like is often portions of farmland being fallowed or repurposed or retired, restored. So there's just a lot of landscape change that's happening in this region already. So this initiative sort of looked at these two things side by side and said, wow, maybe we can leverage both this critical area for monarch conservation and the landscape change that's already happening, and to try to integrate more habitat into the landscape. So that's kind of the concept behind the initiative. And here are some, I'll show you some, whoops, somehow I went backward. Sorry, one second. Okay, here are some maps to give a little bit more orientation, especially folks maybe tuning in from outside of California. So on the left there, you can see these are the EPA ecoregion level 4 shown in California with the pink and the kind of orange colors as the Central Valley and the San Joaquin Valley. So just to kind of orient where we are in the state. And then on the right side, you have these critical areas for recovering Western monarchs. The Central Valley you can see is that priority 1 area, the early breeding zone. And so this is an area where the native plant supply is, I would say, a little underdeveloped, and really trying to ensure that that supply is there to meet these habitat needs. So the collaborative, the United States Fish and Wildlife launched this effort by convening a really diverse and big group of stakeholders, state and federal agencies, conservation organizations, a number of pollinator and monarch focused organizations, but not exclusively that. Also larger restoration organizations like River Partners are involved, and then native seed producers. And this feels like a really unique element of this collaborative to hold up, especially in this conference. Just really neat that folks recognize the need to have the native seed suppliers in the conversation early on. And so that was a really, I think, unique element and a very savvy design to this collaborative. So lots of partners involved. And then kind of the backbone of this collaborative started with the draft of a 5-year strategic plan. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife drafted this up and then shared it with the collaborative, received lots of input and integrated that input into the plan. One of the really unique things about this strategic plan is that it does include a focus on native seed and plant material development in coordination with the habitat implementation activities that the plan is striving to achieve. And it explicitly says in the plan, it recognizes that native plant and seed materials take 3 to 5 years to amplify if you're starting with wildland collected seed. And therefore, we need to kind of build that timeline into the plan. And so I think that was also just a unique nod and kind of inclusion of this element early on in the strategic development of this plan. There are other efforts going on as well. So the plan also really aims to be aligned and build off of these existing efforts, which are sort of a mouthful. So I'll just say the WAFWA, and there's also a multi-agency working group focused on monarchs and pollinators in California. The one I really want to highlight is the California Native Seed Strategy. So these elements of this initiative strategic plan do kind of highlight and pull out important pieces of the California Native Seed Strategy, including regional collaboration. The California Native Seed Strategy has these regional working groups, and so we were able to collaborate with what was called the Great Valley Regional Working Group, and other elements that are highlighted in the seed strategy. So that's really exciting to see this effort really building on these other strategies and ensuring alignment with them. So the next thing that we did through this collaborative was to say, okay, we've got all of these incredibly talented and experienced people involved. We need to be efficient with everyone's time. And so how can we leverage folks' expertise in these different areas that are important to the plan? So we identified these different themes throughout the strategic plan and created action teams or sort of subgroups of collaborative members. So we have the habitat implementation and coordination team. This also ended up being kind of our steering committee for the collaborative. So they help to kind of review documents and move things forward and make some decisions. It's kind of a clearinghouse committee, but otherwise are also really focused on just getting habitat out on the landscape and coordinating around the different projects that might be happening or are underway in the future. Then we have the native plant materials team. I highlighted that here. The mission of this team is to improve native plant material availability for implementers with a focus on improved volume pricing and eco-type availability while helping to stabilize the native plant and seed supply chain. So really explicit focus on the need to develop these materials in collaboration with the rest of the collaborative. I won't read through, I've kind of done a quick summary of these other research and monitoring, action team, landowner incentives, and communications. And of course, these action teams all collaborate with each other, and there are touch points that they all kind of have with each other. But I've highlighted the ones the native plant materials team is mostly working with, that research and monitoring team, and then the habitat implementation team. And this has been really a great technique when kind of thinking about a big collaborative. I think it focuses people's time and time commitment to the collaborative. So we're having separate meetings just for the action teams. And we have those kind of once every 2 months-ish. And then a large full collaborative group meeting we're aiming for twice a year. So it's kind of spreads out people's participation needs and then really directs their focus as to where their expertise and their experience can most highly be leveraged. And then this is my last slide here. So I want to just highlight some of these action team collaborations, which are really neat. So I mentioned that plant material team working with the habitat implementation team, sort of saying, okay, what projects do you all have coming down the pipeline? What are your plant material needs? How can we help meet those and plan accordingly? And then also, specific lists of plant species and ecotypes that will be needed. And so we have both of those teams working on populating a shared spreadsheet and trying to collaborate there with the end goal. You can see in this photo is another example of identifying also just existing projects that are already funded, restoration projects that are already happening, and to say, where can we integrate more monarch habitat into these projects? So often it's milkweed plantings. We have the Conservation Corps helping in this case. And it's really just a lot of coordination and recognition of like, oh, we're doing plantings at this site already. Let's integrate some milkweed. So that's been really neat. Then the priority species and regionally appropriate plant mixes, that's a coordination also with the research and monitoring group who are looking at sort of these priority species, best practices, things like that. And then finally on here, I've got this land access agreement for seed collections on public lands. This is kind of an ongoing discussion and sometimes a challenge, particularly for private seed companies on public lands where the restrictions are more explicit around, who can collect there and what happens to the seed after that. But there's some really just, I would say, fruitful discussions around that happening. And we have actually a memo around kind of public-private land partnerships in terms of land access for seed collection. So these are just some examples of the collaborations happening across the action teams with a kind of focus on the plant material team element. So my hope is just to share that this initiative is happening. We're excited about it, really grateful to be a part of it. And this kind of model of having a big collaborative, really diverse group of people, but then these kind of focused action teams has been a neat thing to kind of pilot. And the result is that we are indeed getting some more monarch habitat out onto the landscape and hopefully helping to kind of develop the native plant and seed supply along the way. So that is all I have for today. Feel free, I can put the strategic plan itself. I'll be happy to share that in the chat after this. And you can contact me at this My Valley Eco email or through HOVA. The conference is using my berkeley.edu email, and either is fine. I'd welcome any questions. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. That sounds like a really great collaborative and project you've got going. We have a few questions for you and plenty of time. Yep, plenty of time to answer them. Okay, first question. I understand that monarch butterflies overwinter in eucalyptus trees in California, which are not native to the area. Is it known where they traditionally spent the winter in California before eucalyptus?
Okay, so I should have said that I am not a monarch expert. So my ability to answer very specific monarch questions are going to be a little bit limited. I apologize. It's true. I actually just went to one of these overwintering sites down by Santa Cruz, California, and saw these amazing clusters of monarchs in the eucalyptus trees there. I would love to connect you with one of our collaborative members who can answer your question better. I'm sorry, I don't have that expertise, so I don't want to misspeak.
Great. That sounds good. Let's see. Next we have, oh, is the memo you mentioned publicly available for seed collection?
Yes, and I'm happy to, I can actually share it in the chat here. I can also upload it in Hova, can I, Alexis,
I
to?
think we're out of documents that we can
Okay.
share without having to add on an extra fee. So,
Okay, no worries. I'll share it in the chat here and then feel free to follow up with me via email.
okay,
But I can do that right now.
okay. I'm sure we could probably figure out something to email attendees stuff too, but yeah. Um, okay.
Right.
Next question. I'm interested to hear more about your land access agreements. Is that something we can connect about? And that's from Alon from the Mount Cuba Center.
Yeah, absolutely. So this I can, and I should say my background is a little bit more on kind of the policy side of things and a lot of the stakeholder engagement. So this one I can definitely speak to. So we actually were able to engage with an environmental law firm on this topic just to ask the question, like, what is precedent? And we're looking specifically within California law and legislation around establishing some kind of like public-private partnerships for private seed companies that are collecting seed on public lands. And the memo essentially makes the case that yes, there is no reason why this couldn't be worked out from a legal perspective. Of course, many of whether it's national parks or BLM or in our case, CDFW, have their own regulations around, right? Like if seed is collected on their lands, they must go back onto those lands. Like the restoration work must like result in the seed going back onto the land. So with the caveat that there are, right, agency by agency, absolutely like limitations and regulations that have to be followed. We were actually working with someone at CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, on a potential regulations change to try to create a little bit more flexibility around those regulations. And of course, that's an ongoing process, and there's a lot involved there. But there are some folks through this collaborative working particularly with US Fish and Wildlife through their partners program to look at ways in which seed companies can collect more easily. It's also depending if there's a big reliance on private companies to do the native seed amplification, right? That adds an element of it. It would be really different if there was like lots of, at least in California, fewer small scale, very small scale, but like fewer that are non-private companies that are collecting. So it's something I'm happy to connect with you further on. Shoot me an email and I put the strategy in the chat right there, but now I will put this memo in the chat so you all have it as well.
Yeah, great. It looks like folks are interested in any documentation or documents that you are able to share with us.
Okay.
Okay, we've got two more questions. Let's see. How many growers were part of your plant material action team, and were these for-profit entities? Did you develop contracts with suppliers, and can you speak to that process?
So we had, I guess, three technically different entities. One is, and folks are probably familiar with Heritage Growers, which is connected to River Partners, the nonprofit. But then we have the Native Seed Group. We have a representative from used to be Great Valley Seed and now works with me at Valley Eco. And so it's a handful of kind of the majority of the bigger native seed producers. We I think could improve, like we could expand and improve on attendance by trying to connect with some of the much smaller growers or nurseries. But then we also have folks from Xerces, Monarch Point Joint Venture, excuse me, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, all participating in that group. So it's not exclusive, and that's the point, right? It's not exclusively the native seed producers in that action team, but it has that element, and then these other partners, representatives as well from these other kind of sectors and interest groups, which makes it a really dynamic, I think, and fruitful like conversation every time we meet. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Well, we have one more question. Our next lightning presenter had to, at the last minute, send us a video of their talk. So she won't be joining us for questions. So we might have a very short gap if so we could just answer the last question, um, which is how did you select what nectar plants to focus on? Are milkweeds established only by plugs or by seeding as well?
Um, Great question. Okay, I hope I just sent that memo in the chat, so hopefully that went through. So this is part of the collaborative process to determine the species and the ecotypes. So partly that's working with the research and monitoring group. What are those nectar species that are most critical to this region in particular, where I would say there is less of these plant materials already developed? So we're working with the kind of best practices from these groups that are focused on pollinator conservation. And then also working with the habitat implementation team. What are your projects? What types of plants are already planning to go out onto these projects? What would be strategic and possible, feasible to integrate into these projects based on their exact location? So it's kind of a collaboration across both of those teams with the native plant materials team saying, we have this ecotype, we think we could get our hands on this one, et cetera. There have not been specific contracts, new contracts. Oh, there may actually be one. I have to double check this. Like the idea is that this would turn into, right, some like agreements or contracts so folks can go and explicitly grow out more. We just launched this. Essentially, it's been a year. So the first year was really building off, okay, what do we already have in the works? What can we, what seed supply do we have? But I think the hope is in the future there will be more contracts that enable folks to kind of build up the supply for, a project that's happening in 1 or 2 years. Yeah, it's a great question. Oh, thank you. Dee Dee is saving me. Okay, Dee Dee, everyone should read Dee Dee's response about monarchs. And Dee Dee, please chime in. Of course, there's like monarch experts on this call somewhere. So thank you to whoever's out there who wants to chime in on the monarch specific question that I'm not able to answer.
Um, okay, great. Well, thanks so much, Karina.
Thanks
And
all.
yeah, and let's see. Okay, I am going to attempt to share this video. And if y'all will just bear with me, we're going to switch between pre-recorded, a couple of PowerPoints, another pre-recorded, and then one more PowerPoint for this lightning round. So we're going to start with Natalie Howe talking about explaining the Meadow-Morphosis, outreach about converting turf to pollinator habitat. And let me know if this comes through and is working.
Agriculture's farm production and conservation service in the natural resources conservation service part of that group, and I'm thrilled to be sharing with you explaining the Meadow-Morphosis outreach about converting turf to pollinator habitat.
Shoot. Are people still struggling to hear it?
Project in the context of our program in the USDA. I work at
And so the project that we did was converting turf to meadows, which, in addition to improving the plant biodiversity and improves the pollinator biodiversity, and in our project, we're talking very widely with a lot of local groups about why the pollinators are important and sharing that information with the folks who are excited to hear it. But first, we had to have a good meadow to have good pollinators to come and visit. In order to convert the turf to a meadow, I'm
Okay, everyone.
Hi.
Oops.
The U.S.
Sorry.
Department of Agriculture's farm.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. Thanks for bearing with me. I think you can all hear it now. I'm going to restart it. Let me just double check on our time. I think we can manage to get through most of it, but let's start cruising. And then I keep losing my controls based on Zoom, but here we go.
Production and Conservation Service in the Natural Resources Conservation Service, part of that group, and I'm thrilled to be sharing with you explaining the Meadow-Morphosis outreach about converting turf to pollinator habitat. To start with, first, I was going to put my project in the context of our program in the USDA. I work at a plant materials center, and the plant materials centers are scattered across the whole country. There are 25 of them, and they help develop region-specific information to help farmers implement conservation practices. And what that means is that we don't give farmers advice about how to grow the food crops that they're already good at growing. We help give them advice and ideas and tools and strategies for improving their soil quality, for increasing their air quality or the water quality on their farmland, and especially, as I'm talking about now, how to increase the biodiversity on their farmland. And so the project that we did was converting turf to meadows, which, in addition to improving the plant biodiversity and improves the pollinator biodiversity, and in our project, we're talking very widely with a lot of local groups about why the pollinators are important and sharing that information with the folks who are excited to hear it. But first, we had to have a good meadow to have good pollinators to come and visit. In order to convert the turf to a meadow, one of our strategies was putting down tarps. This, of course, only worked in small areas. A small area is the first one we tried. We put down tarps to solarize the land to kill the pre-existing turf grasses, and then we planted plugs of the wildflower species we wanted to grow there. For larger projects, we didn't have the tarps to cover a larger plot of land, so with that, we tilled the land and planted teff. And teff is an Ethiopian grain that we found works well for providing an overwintering mulch for seedlings. And so we tried that on this NASA land, which is one of the neighboring federal facilities to our land in Beltsville, Maryland. With that, there was some sign-related outreach to show the people who were working in the NASA facility what was going on and to manage their expectations for what was going to come next in the turf to meadow conversion. So I'm going to talk a little later about some of that education component of our project. here's an example of my colleague RJ planting the wildflowers into the teff, and an example of some of our signage showing how we were explaining what was happening on that land. Some of the wildflowers that we planted are shown here, and we planted them from two sources. One from Ernst's conservation seed, and one from hand collecting from meadows that we had established in earlier years. And this guidance we used was from the NRCS, or Natural Resources Conservation Service, Field Office Technical Guide. And each state has a technical guide where they give implementation standards for how they think is a good practice for achieving those conservation goals that I mentioned before, improving the soil quality, and in this case, improving the biodiversity by planting a meadow. So we have guidelines for what are some good seed mixes to plant on upland sites, mesic sites, and wetland sites. And so we use some plants from the upland selection here. And once we had planted them, and once the plants were established, we did a lot of good and interesting education projects, one of which was having meadow walks. Once the meadow was established, it was really exciting to walk with people through there to explain to them what was good about what we had done and how we did it. We did some outreach to some local federal landowners from across the government, including the Food and Drug Administration, the Department of Defense, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Geological Survey. And so we scheduled a day for them to come and show them how we had established the meadow in these areas that had formerly been turf, and talk about why we would do that and how they could do that on some of their land. And so that helped really build community around the meadow making goals. We also had a blog. The NASA folks explained what was happening on their site and took regular pictures of the flowers as they bloomed and the pollinators as they visited. Similarly, we had a podcast to share in a different way about some of the stories of why we were doing this pollinator meadow establishment and how we did it, and what are some of the reasons that people would want to do that in other lands. And finally, as I mentioned, the signs were really important for the people who were using the land, who were going to work there every day, for the maintenance crews, and for the office workers who were coming in and walking by these meadow plantings. And finally, we had interns and volunteers, and that was a really exciting component of this project. Some of the interns were master gardeners. Some of them were summer interns from colleges. And so with them, we planted out some of these plugs that we later plugged into the meadow. With them, we did some of the sampling of the meadows to see what species established the best. And so it was really exciting to have them bring their expertise and then build their expertise with this project. If you have any questions, I'm unfortunately not able to answer them right now, but I will be if you send me an email at natalie.m.howe@usda.gov. Thanks so much for your time, and looking forward to talking with more of you about converting turf to meadows and making a metamorphosis happen on working land. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, as Natalie said, she's available by email for questions, and we're going to move right into Owen with the Salmon Valley Stewardship. Does that look good for everybody? Owen, oh no, we can't hear you. And it says you're not on mute, so
Now, can you hear me?
yes.
Great. Sorry about that. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Owen Baughman. I've been thinking about how to improve restoration success for almost 20 years across different Western states, but I'm going to give you a pretty colorful whirlwind introduction here to a budding new native plant program based in Salmon, Idaho. Next slide. First off, to look at quickly where Salmon is. It's in east central Idaho, surrounded by tall mountains that have pretty deep wet forests, long or low, dry sagebrush valleys in between, and then lots of steep river canyons with dry forests and grasslands. So a lot of different ecosystems colliding here. Next slide. The history of our program is that land managers here have been seeing threats to native plant communities on the rise, like invasive plants, increasing fire frequencies, and climate change. So a local working group formed a few years ago in around 2021. And a year later, the Forest Service established a 5-year agreement with the local nonprofit Salmon Valley Stewardship to do some work in this area. So a full-time manager was hired in 2023 and immediately began work. His name was Ari Pepper, and he built most of the program that I'm talking about today. And then, and this program initially focused on seed collection as per the Forest Service agreement. And I joined just this last spring. Next slide. Our program goals are still the original goals of the Forest Service agreement that was set up with our organization, but it's to develop local solutions for accelerating the pace and scale of restoration, source, collect, and increase locally appropriate seeds, identify and employ improved restoration practices, and then, the real simple task of developing increased regional capacity in all stages of restoration within the region, which sounds like, well, that's big, but also it's a great umbrella to use because as we all know, there's so many little pieces to doing all this. So we have some pretty broad, but still some good focus in here. Next slide. Currently, the structure and strengths of our program are pretty becoming of a small program. There's only 2 of us full time. It's so neat to see all these different programs around the country at this conference because they all look so different based on the needs that each community has. So I just want to touch on our area of focus. Next slide. Our structure is that our native plant program is housed within an existing and pretty well trusted nonprofit in the community, Salmon Valley Stewardship. It's been around since about 2004 in this area doing contracting work with agencies, but also a lot of stuff in agro ecosystems and community engagement. There's 2 of us fully permanent staff, but we are able to tap into SVS's flexible workforce of technicians doing other work. Whenever we need a lot of hands to collect seed or to do something big, we can dip into that workforce. And that's really a flexible model for us that prevents us from having to keep a lot of people busy full-time in our program. We have a dedicated seed cleaning and storage facility that's hosted by the Forest Service. And we have an integrated operation. We do everything from the scouting to collecting to cleaning to storage and then doing some hands-on restoration as well. Again, it's a pretty small scale, but it is fully integrated in that way. And we barely have multiple funding sources, but we're hoping to expand that so that we can have some more stability and broaden our goals a little bit. Next question, or next slide. We've collected over 100 species to date using pretty much a regional admixture collection strategy. This is kind of turning into a large population phenology database that was started from scratch, but it's starting to build and become useful to us and others. We have quite a bit of inventory of equipment for cleaning seed, storing seed. Although we try not to store the seed, we try to get it out on the land as quickly as possible, but we do have ability to store it properly. And we're starting to export our seed cleaning protocols to Ranger so that other people can work with these species because a lot of them have not been worked with before. Next slide. Some pretty pictures. Everyone loves putting their hands on seeds. Here's some easy one. It's top balsam root, super easy to clean, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of fun examples of seed that's not so easy. The cat's eye down there is just a spiky nightmare to deal with, but it's really fun once you get it. Everyone knows milkweed and its floof. We collect a lot of milkweed and that can be challenging. Bitterroot has beautiful, clean little seeds, but they do not come out very easily from the prickly pear cactuses they get stuck in. Moving on here, a couple of quick images of our collection and cleaning shop. Next slide, sorry. We've got some hand-built, but a lot of professional small-scale seeding equipment as well. Click forward a little bit to next slide. Our restoration is focused more on a restoration island dispersal method where we don't seed the whole landscape that we need with seed, but we do these pocketed, small, targeted spots where we put a lot of seed, and we use both bare seed and seed balls to accomplish these restoration islands. And the goal is just to try to get something established in a small spot and let it spread. I'm moving quickly here to try to make up a little time. I'd like to get to the end. We use multiple methods of seeding. Like I said, there was a large seed ball focus at the beginning on this program, but we also use bare seed, and seed balls have been fun to engage with volunteers because they're really fun to make, and they even slingshotted them across the river to places that were hard to get to, which was a lot of fun. Next slide. I also want to talk quickly about, we've set up 2 first-time growing contracts that are kind of custom-made contracts for small growers who are used to growing native plants but have never grown native seed, grown plants for seed before. And these are pretty small sub-acre contracts, but we make them follow careful protocols to ensure genetic viability and then or genetic diversity. And we stagger their payments based on incremental progress rather than just on seed deliver at the end. And then the growers also agree to share any useful propagation info they come into. And so these are small and we're really excited about them, but we're hoping to increase them in the future. Some super quick numbers here. This year we collected 65 species from 66,000 plants. It was about 44 pounds of clean seed, which is around 20 million seeds. We made 7 seed mixes that have up to 28 species each. We made over 250,000 seed balls. And we restored or put in seed at about 1,400 restoration islands that are spread across 1,000 acres. And we put in some new monitoring plots that are going to help us learn. Our goal is not to do science. Our goal is to try to get restoration done, but we're trying to do just enough learning to keep ourselves on track. Next slide. I can actually, if we're getting close to running out of time, I can skip a couple here. Let's see, move on to, yeah, I think our longer term goals are to investigate whether there's a native plant partnership potential here in this area, but we all know that those are challenging to put together because they don't just form from somebody wanting them to happen. You got to have a lot of people on board, a lot of conversations. So we're hoping to look forward to that in the future. But in general, if we're improving the quality and scale of regional restoration, we're happy with this program, and restoration in this area is still it's starting to happen at larger scales, but it's not quite as large as at other places in the West. So we're trying to fit our program to those needs. Next slide. But I've been in this long enough to know that especially in arid lands, success will remain inconsistent. It's never possible to get guaranteed success for any one action or any one tool. Most seeds will die. It's always the case, and it always will be. There's just too many factors we can't control, and plants make a lot of seeds. But we can improve our chances of success by getting the pieces that we can control right, which is what seed you use, genetics it has, the practices we use to get them on the ground, and the timing. So we can control those things. And if we do that regularly enough and don't put all of our eggs in one basket with single large efforts, but we spread it out through time, I know that we'll get more successful. And I only mention this because so many people get really excited about this and they overpromise and they overexpect from restoration because they're like, we got all the pieces right. It's like, yeah, but it's still not going to be a success every time. So I never want to oversell or overpromise what we can do. So sorry for that being super quick, but I do want to say that this program was built before I got here with Ari Pepper, with Salmon Vice Stewardship, and then our Forest Service partners as well. And we have seed, and we're starting to try to get researchers to use our seed and growers to use our seed. And so if you are interested in doing anything with seeds from this region, please scan this QR code or reach out to me on Whova. And we're also hiring right now. So thank you all. Sorry for talking so fast.
No, thank you, Owen. That was really great. It seems like it sounds like an amazing program. I feel like I have a lot of questions for you. So maybe we can connect another time. And thank you for dealing with the shorter time. So we'll go right into Lina's presentation. And Lina, I'll just let you take it away. And I am here to flip slides for you.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
I'm Lina Arabyat. I'm the Seed Bank Lab Manager at the Atlanta Botanical Garden, which is also the Central South for the Southeastern Conservation. Today, I will be talking about a Wet-Prairie restoration project at Deer Lake State Park in Florida that combines immediate revegetation with long-term investment in a regional native seed supply. The goal is not just to restore one park, but to build capacity for future restoration across the Gulf Coast. Next. So for those who do not know the Center for Southeastern Conservation, our mission is to conserve imperiled plants and the natural communities, with our focus being on the Southeast US and the Caribbean. And we use this as schematic to illustrate how our work bridges in situ and ex situ approaches, supported on either side by conservation genetics and conservation ecology, and centers on our network and partnerships. Next. There were decades of fire submersion across the Gulf Coast that have allowed herbaceous Wet-Prairie to be replaced with woody thickets, especially the spring tea, which is native to Florida. This shift has reduced native biodiversity and weakened the important ecosystem services, including the storm mitigation. Next. To address this, Atlanta Botanical Garden partnered with the Florida Park Service and the Northeast Florida Sensational Landscape Program on a 3-year restoration project covering more than 300 acres of coastal wetlands at Deer Lake State Park. Next. For about a decade now, ABG and the Florida Park Service has been doing the hard work of clearing thickets and reintroducing the fire. And now it is time to begin revegetation of the herbaceous species. Next. So this project links every stage of the native seed pipeline, from wild collections to banking, propagating, and outplanting. So restoration and seed supply development happens at the same time. We are building a local seed supply for banking 10 to 15 common Wet-Prairie species, along with 5 at-risk taxa. We also have included banking bulk seeds that will be added to the ABG's Conservation Seed Bank as a source of plant material for potential future revegetation. Next, please. So this project focuses on both ecological foundation species and rare plants. We are developing protocols to produce more than 4,500 plugs, which will be planted across 10 sites in the park. At-risk species will include the pitcher plant species and the and the yellow fingerless orchid, allowing us to pair habitat restoration with species recovery. Next, please. This integrated outplanting of common ecological foundational species, as well as the augmentation of rare plant populations, will advance multiple intersection conservation and restoration goals, including expanding wildlife habitat connectivity, supporting species recovery, and improving overall coastal resilience. Next, please. So we are currently in year 1. This year 1 is focused on building the foundation, collecting material, establishing monitoring systems, and preparing for the restoration implementation. So far, we have collected seeds from both common and rare Wet-Prairie species. The common species will have their restoration structure and ground cover, while the rare species are intended for augmentation and reintroduction, which supports biodiversity and conservation goals. So right now, we are establishing field plots to collect the baseline data on pollinators and herpetofauna before any outplanting occurs. This is critical because it allows us to measure ecological change after restoration. Meanwhile, plants are being propagated at our conservation safeguarding nursery for common species and at Midtown for rare species, ensuring appropriate care and scaling. This fall, we plan to plant at Deer Lake, assuming that propagated plants are large enough and ready. After planting, we will continue monitoring the plots to evaluate how revegetation influences the pollinators' communities over time. So this long-term monitoring will help us assess restoration success and guide adaptive management in year 2 and 3. Next, please. So I just want to share with you all, this is our team at the center, which is led by Dr. Emily Coffey. Maybe most of you all will know her. I also have started the team members that are associated with this project. So it's about like 10 team members. Next slide, please. I would like to I would like to acknowledge our partners and thank them for this opportunity to work on the project. And thank you all for listening. If you all have any questions or would like to partner up with us, this is my email. Thank you, guys.
Great. I think we are going to try to stay on time. Thank you for moving through that, and looks like some really cool stuff happening. But we're going to switch next, and I know that folks are asking questions. Maybe you can either ask them in the Whova session, or maybe Lina can answer it live as well. So next, or sorry, type in an answer in the box.
Hey everybody, I'm
Okay, next we're gonna go to Liz Goldpenny with, I believe, the Denver Botanic Gardens. Another presentation, but then Liz will be available for some questions as we have time, and hopefully all is still good with sound and video.
Liz Goldpenny. I'm coming at you from Denver Botanic Gardens, and I wanted to talk to you a bit about our native seed availability program that we've just started this past season. So here at Denver Botanic, we have partnered with the Bureau of Land Management, and through this native seed increase availability program, we are looking to make large strides toward hopefully closing the ever-widening gap between the need for native seed as a resource to enhance our restoration projects and the current stock of native seed that we have. And so I'm sure we're all familiar with this feedback loop from the National Seed Strategy. We will be playing around kind of in this sub loop of the feedback loop, starting a lot in evaluation and development, but through those processes we will be establishing field plants in an agronomic setting, and then hopefully producing seed and then cycling around like that. And all of that is to hopefully move toward accomplishing our two main goals with this project. One is to kind of be that middleman between the agency, in this case the BLM, and the commercial growers. And I've heard some people say that they've noticed quite a few native plant species that are of high restoration value are very hard to get to produce in mass in an agronomic commercial setting. And so we are hoping to be that kind of middleman where we are going to be receiving seed stock from local native plant populations, seed that was collected via Seeds of Success, and we're going to be taking it through the entire cultivation process, all the way from germination to hopefully producing and harvesting seed. And we will be trialing and testing different methods and strategies along the way to kind of work out any kinks that arise, any problems, so that we can then hopefully produce a foolproof protocol or instruction manual for each species. And then in this process, we will be producing seed. So by the end, we are hoping to give to the BLM a starting stock of seed and a straight to success instruction manual for each of these species to then give to commercial growing facilities so that they can very quickly and efficiently produce mass amounts of seed and work toward closing that gap. So we started with 4 species so far in this program that we received from the BLM. 1 annual and 3 perennials. The annual is Phacelia crenulata, also known as scorpion knotweed, and the 3 perennials are Heterotheca villosa, hairy false golden aster, Sphaerosia coccinea, scarlet globe mallow, and Stanleya pinnata, which is desert princess bloom. This is what they look like in our greenhouse setting. We grew them out in containers, and we had a goal number to establish about 250 of each species in the field, and we met that pretty well, I would say, this first season. Here is where our field plots are, and I wanted to stop and talk a little bit about how we at Denver Botanic Gardens are kind of like in this unique and lucky position because we not only have our main gardens location, which is located in downtown Denver, but if you go 20 miles southwest towards the foothills, you'll find Denver Botanic Gardens at Chatfield Farms. And it's what it sounds like. It's a farms. It's a huge property that's got a farms. It's got gardens. It's got all this open space, representative of several major habitat types, from prairie, grassland to riparian. And of course, it's a location for our experimental field plots and research. And those field plots are shown at the bottom there by that red star. But we have this kind of golden triangle, say, of farmers and horticulturists and researchers, and we can all work together to honestly run a very successful seed production program here at Denver Botanic. So that's why I say I think we're in a really unique position for this kind of work. This is what our field plots looked like for each species, not unlike what a lot of you are used to in the double row fashion. So with the double rows, we put weed cloth in between each row and around the margins of each species plot in order to hopefully mitigate weed pressures, as you'll see on the right. And on the left, if you kind of squint, you'll see those little red lines going down in between each double row, and that represents our drip lines. So we used a drip line irrigation system for each species in order to help them establish. Again, another look at our species plots in the field in ArcGIS. Each color is representative of the different species, and then overlaid here you'll see the weed cloth design for a better idea. And here's what it looks like from one of our drone shots in the field. This is shortly after installing the weed cloth and the irrigation system. Now on the ground, each one of these photos here shows each of our species shortly after outplanting, and I think this is really special and important to note. I mean, look here, these are our two best producers this season. This is peak season, mid-season. We went, say nothing of growing from seed, but we also designed this whole program and implemented everything, worked with all these different people to install everything, and grew these plants in these numbers from seed and got them to this size, flowering at this level, and then shortly after this photo was taken, producing seed at a very high level. This all happened in 6 months. So I think like that kind of timetable is really attractive and important to push to not only, of course, native seed landscapers, but people like public and private landowners and managers who we are trying to kind of market this seed toward and increase the demand for this seed so that it's used more and in larger ways. And I think something like this makes it very attractive for people like that. Best in show, if you couldn't tell, were our best ones from a production standpoint so far in this last season. On the left, you see Serelsia coccinea. On the right, you see Heterotheca vellata. And we'll look at Heterotheca more so here. She was our best one. We made almost 4 million seed in just this first season with slightly less than 250 plants. And we also have a seed x-ray, a CubeTech x-ray here at the gardens. And we did a quick look at viability through percent fill. And once we figured that out through some subsets and calculated it, we still walked away with just under 3 million viable seeds. And honestly, I think the viability will go up this season because we're going to start harvesting a little bit later in the season to avoid any early producer aborts that we often see in asters, and I think that's what we were seeing here. Here's a look at what they were doing when they were in just full flower and full production. And as you probably know, like these asters, once they start going, they produce all season. And so in order to keep up with them, vacuuming is kind of the best way to do it most efficiently. So I was out there most days with my little handheld vacuum, vacuuming away at the seed head. And this is what it looked like after we harvested the seeds. With this species, the pappus is really kind of stuck to the achene, and we're going to store these for a somewhat long amount of time, possibly before they get to the commercial facilities. And so to avoid mold or anything in storage, I wanted to get that off as much as I could. So I used like a corrugated rubber mat board with some ridges to kind of rub that off without breaking the seeds. And then kind of, well, we don't have any big machines here yet at the garden. So I used this rock tumbler that I kind of turned into a sieve shaker and then a seed blower in order to get a lot of that out. And we ended up with a pretty pure stock of seed by the end. And this is what one of our seed x-rays looked like. The circled ones are the solid and the dense ones that are filled and viable, and the other ones that are falling to the background are empty. And we had great success, honestly, first season with the Spiralcia. We still made over 200,000 seeds. Phacelia, we did 300 seeds, and I think that will be far greater than that this season with some changes we're implementing. And Stanlea, it takes a little longer to establish them, I think. So we did get quite a few established, only one flower, but I think that will be a lot better this next season. And here we go. The season's upon us. We're starting again. And so again, all the seed that we produce as a starting stock, along with this foolproof, very successful, hopefully, protocol, will be sent back to the BLM to then be given to these commercial growing facilities so that we can just produce a lot of seed very quickly and efficiently, and hopefully work at closing that gap that we were talking about. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, that was great. Thank you, Liz, for putting together that presentation. I'm loving these production photos. Let's see, we are pretty much at time. There are a few questions in the Q&A box if you wanted to view those. I think as a panelist, you can type an answer. If not, we can move them over to your session as well. And I think then we will just head into our last lightning round presentation, which is from Diana with the University of Victoria up in Canada. So welcome, Diana.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have a lot of animations, so I'm gonna do the little hand waiting for next slide, if that's okay.
Great. Yep, I can see you. So,
yeah.
Great.
So, hi everyone, my name is Diana. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Victoria, and today I'll present the initial results of my study assessing the commercial availability of native plant material for the restoration of oak-associated ecosystems across the Pacific Northwest. And I do want to say that those are initial results, and obviously I have lots of data and some that didn't make it to this presentation, and I would love to hear your suggestions and ideas of what would be interesting to look at and answer with this data to make it useful. So, oak-associated ecosystems are highly biodiverse ecosystems of the Pacific Northwest, where they have evolved with millennia of traditional stewardship by First Peoples. And colonization, species invasion, and habitat loss have greatly reduced their extent and created threats to these ecosystems, prompting, you can move on to the next one, prompting major restoration efforts by local communities, organizations, and researchers. So here, this might be preaching to the choir in this conference, but we all know that often these restoration efforts involve seeding or planting with native species. And while part of these efforts obtain plants through informal sharing and gifting of plants, as well as salvaging or transplanting, many projects rely on the commercial market of native plant vendors to obtain plant material for restoration. You can move on to the next. Sorry, there's a lot of them. So yeah. However, we know that the species available from commercial vendors are only a subset of the native pool of species, which is known as the commercial native species pool, and studies across the globe have found that only 8 to 44% of the regional flora is commercially available as seeds, plugs, or pots for restoration. So we know that they are a subset, but we don't know if the commercially available species for oak-associated ecosystems adequately include the diversity needed to support representative restoration outcomes. And that's where my research questions come into play. So first, I was interested in basically assessing what's the commercial availability of vascular plant species for the restoration of oak-associated ecosystems. And then how does commercial availability vary across ecoregion and ecosystem types? And then to better understand potential biases, how is commercial availability characterized in terms of taxonomic, ecological, and conservation-related characteristics? So to do that, I conducted a survey of seed and plant suppliers. I got suggestions of suppliers and vendors from restoration practitioners, and then conducted an extensive online search in databases of plant suppliers. That resulted in 322 suppliers, which you can see plotted on the map, of which 25% identify themselves as native nurseries. And then I prioritize, so I gather species list from the suppliers. I prioritize native nurseries for contact, and a small number of other types of suppliers were contacted for additional species. And lists was obtained per email, downloaded from website as adequate follow-up phone call as needed. And I successfully obtained list of available species from 83 suppliers, 39 at close or cannot be reached. And sorry, those are the ones that are plotted on the map. And then I compared the species available with an ecoregional flora, which is produced by Ed Overson and Gallagher, based on multiple sources, such as herbarium data, published floras, range maps, site species lists. And each species in this ecoregional flora is assessed by fidelity to prairie oak habitats, geographic distribution by the 4 ecoregion sectors. So on the map on the left, you have the entire ecoregion, and then each color is one of the ecoregion sections. And then also ecological distribution by ecological system. And then all species names were standardized based on the World Checklist of Vascular Plant Species. So, okay, what did I encounter? To start, we'll see a lot of bar charts like this in this presentation. The x-axis will always show proportion of native species, and the x-axis will vary. Bars will show in the dark green the commercially available species, and in gray the unavailable, and the total number of species per category will always be on the top. Okay, so what is the commercial availability of vascular plant species? What I encountered is that 55.8% of native species were available commercially across the entire ecoregion, and that availability did not differ between species that are available as plants in containers or as seeds. When looking at the availability of species native to each ecoregion section, which are mapped on the x-axis, what I encountered is that commercial availability didn't differ much across ecoregion sections. However, availability dropped when considering only species available from suppliers that were also in that same section, with certain sections such as Lower Columbia, Willamette Valley, which are the most diverse ecoregions, having 40% of species commercially available locally in that section. When looking for species native to the different ecosystem types, which are shown on the x-axis here, from more closed woodlands on the left to more rare and small vernal pools and seepage ecosystems to the right, what I encounter is that availability differ by ecosystem type, with species of more closed canopy ecosystems being more available. And that pattern actually was the same when we looked at this separately for each of the 4 ecoregion sections. So don't worry about the specific values here. Just look at the general trend and how the 4 panels are similar with the general panel. And then based on the previous result, it will come as no surprise that when looking at availability of different growth forms, we saw that woody species were the most available, while annual forbs and graminoids were the least available, despite the fact that annual forbs is the second most diverse group in the region. And then moreover, when looking at the species based on their fidelity to oak-associated habitats, with higher fidelity meaning that the species are only found within these ecosystems, and lower fidelity meaning species can be found in other ecosystem types as well, we found that higher fidelity species were less available than lower fidelity species. Availability was also related to the geographical and ecological breadth of the native species. And here I apologize for the only different graph, but it's the same idea. On the x-axis, you can see the number of sections or ecosystems where the species is found, and the availability as a proportion on the y-axis. And what we found on this graph show is that the rarer the species in terms of geographical distribution, or the more specialized in terms of the ecosystem type where it can be found, the less likely the species was to be available. I also looked at the conservation-related characteristics, in particular the conservation risk or conservation status, with higher risk species to the left of the graph, and that's from the NatureServe database. And again, here where we can see the trend was clear and probably related to the previous results. Higher conservation risk species would tend to be the more rare, the more specialized species with smaller distributions, were less available in the commercial species pool. So to conclude here, the majority of native species are commercially available, and that's on the higher end of studies that were similar in different parts of the world. However, commercially available species are a non-random subset dominated by woody and long-lived species, more geographically and ecologically widespread, generalist species that also occur in other habitat types, and less threatened species. I do want to say some limitations that is availability changes over time, and this was just a snapshot. Some species might be more available informally beyond what's sold commercially, and I actually only focus on diversity, not quantity. So even though some species might be available, suppliers might not have enough stock. But still, while the diversity of species available is promising, commercial sourcing biases may hinder efforts to fully represent the ecological diversity and function of oak-associated ecosystems in restoration work. And if there's time, I can take some questions or suggestions, or I can answer in the Wova app.
Yes, I think we have time maybe for one question. Let me just see. Let's see. Okay. As a native plant nursery person, I'm going to guess the availability of different plant types has a lot to do with the kind of quantities that are ordered and in demand. For example, woody trees and shrubs have very consistent demand, whereas understory species are generally not planted in initial stages of restoration projects due to challenges with weeds and maintenance. It's kind of more of a comment.
Yeah, and I think that's a great comment. Like my study is just basically an assessment. I haven't started like I'm not looking at there's many causes of why some things are more or less available. And I think part of it's that there's part of like the difficult in propagating certain plants. So this was definitely just like a broad assessment, but I'm not I think not start to think about why the reasons behind this. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Diana. Those are great results. I was watching the slides at first and then realized I had to watch for your hand, but I'm probably going to go back and listen to that again. So thank you. And next I'd like to introduce Kristen Miskelly from Satin Flower Nurseries. She's here sharing her screen and I can see,
Hello.
yep, that looks great. And we can
And
hear
you
you.
can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Kristen Miskelly. I co-own Satin Flower Nurseries with my husband James, and I'm a biologist and also doing a PhD in the Restoration Futures Lab at the University of Victoria. Today, I wanted to talk about building partnerships to strengthen native seed capacity on southern Vancouver Island in British Columbia. Today, I'm on Chanu First Nation territory in Metchosin. These are shared territories with Sauk First Nation as well as Kosamson and Lekwungen people. And some of the work I'm going to be sharing today, and as well as our native plant nursery, are part of the Wasanich territories of Pauquachin, Sayote, Sartlip, Sakum, and Malahat First Nation, as well as Cowichan tribes. To introduce our nursery briefly, we have two locations in Metchosin and Saanich and work with a team of about 15 incredible people passionate about native plants and restoration. We do restoration work as part of our nursery environment as well and have a focus on accessibility around our retail. So these two locations are open to the general public full-time across both locations to make sure access is there for native plants. We grow about 200 different native species that include a range of forms, some native seed production, of course, and we do our growing of our potted plants and native seeds without herbicides, pesticides, or chemical fertilizers, and all of which is local provenance. Education and outreach is an important part of our work and working towards restoration goals with partners. And these partnerships are what I would really like to focus on today. So these collaborations and partnerships are an integral part of our work. And as a small business, so we are a small for-profit business, these partnerships have really enhanced and allowed us to continue forward in our mission to make native plants and seeds accessible. And so these are what I'll focus on today, is sharing a few of these profile projects. So in the past, just last year, we were so excited to be awarded one of 13 grants in Canada through the World Wildlife Fund Canada for native seed orchards and native seed collection grants, which enabled us to open up more employment in our seed work at the nursery. Eve and Dylan, pictured here, are two employees where we were able to offer full-time positions, working in native seed and enhancing our native seed production, our native seed rows, and also connecting with the public about native seed and sharing about the importance of native seed and also some of the technical information about native seed production, cleaning, and so on. As part of that grant, with in terms of the seed collection aspect of that grant, we're able to do a wider collection of different native plant species and also enhancing the genetics of our existing beds through local provenance collections within our ecoregion. And we've been able to connect with more private landowners and other community partners who were out on the land with different folks collecting small amounts of native plant seed that is then brought back to our nursery for amplification and distribution in the community. And these relationships with these partners is essential to the work. It's not just about access, but it's about the shared learning and community building around that. So along with the funding we were able to receive through WWF, we held a seed partner appreciation gathering last season where we brought these partners together, sharing about native seed, sharing some snacks. We had some native seed focaccia and just had a great time and kind of just sharing about the work that might not always be accessible. Another project that we've been working on of late is with the BC Seed Bank for rare and culturally significant plants. That is organized through the BC Seed Bank Network, Coastal Douglas Fir and Associated Ecosystems Conservation Partnership, UBC Botanical Garden, and Nuku Nurseries. And we focused on Gachmin or Lomatium nudicoli with this work with cultural expertise and advising by Dominique James, who is Powhatan First Nation, also works at our nursery, and brought together folks to collect this species in a culturally appropriate way and with appropriate guidance for such a special species in terms of our local culture here. I wanted to point out and just that there's a BC Seed Bank Network gathering coming up on March 11th for anyone interested in that, and you can reach out directly. I've also put the CDFCP website there for folks in BC or outside of BC who might want to join. Another project I wanted to highlight is a project we've been working on for about 5 years with Stywat Lee Joseph of Swalwyn Botanicals. She's Squamish and Nanaimo First Nation, and we partner with her as well as Wasekam artist Sarah Jim. And we, the nursery provides native seeds, donates it to and with this project, the HEAM project. And with that, those seeds go directly to community. And we are working with specific partners within the local nations who connect with their communities and distribute the seeds. And also working on education and gatherings as those different species are brought into the project. So each year we just focus on a single species. And there's knowledge sharing that is both ecological and cultural about the species, and then the seeds go to community, and we work with people to talk about how to grow the different species and other aspects of those plants. I have two other projects I'm going to quickly highlight before our time is up here, but the University of Victoria has been an essential partner with the nursery. So with Nancy Shackelford through the Restoration Futures Lab at the University of Victoria, we're bridging research and practice and community building in a shared context. And through that work, we're looking at germination profiles of a lot of different prairie oak species and working towards the co-development of a growing and restoration field guide. And by co-development, I'm talking about with local growers and practitioners and Indigenous communities here that we can provide a compiled shared resource on growing native plants and all these wonderful topics related to restoration. Lastly, I'd like to highlight this final project with another community nonprofit, the Native Bee Society of BC, where in our native seed fields, we're working towards looking at the different pollinators that are in our seed fields and using specific species. And this has been a really exciting engagement opportunity. I have learned so much from our bee friends, and they've been putting that data into the BC Atlas and other platforms like iNaturalist with the bee species, but also their plant association in which they're documented on. These are cataloged by professional entomologists, but they're also integrating lots of community and learning into these activities. And it's been a joy having them visit our seed fields that we have in Mechosin, as well as Cobble Hill just outside of Victoria. So with that, I would like to say thank you, and to Morgan and Alexis especially. I just can't imagine the amount of work you're working on right now. You're amazing, and you're really making this a special opportunity for all of us. So with that, I'll see if there's any questions or comments.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. That was really great. Let's see. We definitely have time now to answer questions, and we are also waiting on our next speaker to log in. But do folks have questions? I think people were excited to hear about the native seed focaccia. I guess I have a
Oh,
question.
yes. Yes.
What type of seeds were on there?
Well, I might get in some trouble for this, but I'll just be honest, if I may. So
hmm
don't judge me too hard. So
What happens at the National Native Seed Conference stays here.
okay, with all 300 of us. So
Yeah.
we used Epilobium densiflorum, which in British Columbia is an endangered species. We had a lot of it through our wetland restoration projects in extreme abundance, and we used it gently on our beautiful focaccia that Eve, who's in the conference, made. But we're interested. Some of the other seeds we've used Madia species in like bread and stuff like that, trying different things with some of our edible native seeds. But it was nice to try that for sure.
That's great. Let's see, any other questions from folks? I don't see any in the Q&A right now. I don't know if we still have some of our other speakers here, but maybe we'll just try to keep it simple and yeah. Well, thank you, Kristen.
Okay.
That was great. And let's
Um,
see. Yes. Question.
okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So